If you're a regular listener of mine, you most certainly have noticed that I have been quite critical of the Biden administration and the horrors they have inflicted upon Americans writ large. But I don't think that I have felt any worse than I do now about the administration, not because of anything they did, although we'll talk about that in explicit detail in a second, but because of the fact that the administration has absolutely no self-reflection, absolutely no self-regulation, and that is self-evident and demonstrated not just by their repeated violations of the Constitution in the name of the common good and public good, but in Joe Biden's attempt to once again remain in office as President of the United States. When Biden 2024 was officially announced, as we all expected it to be announced, there were no surprises, I had a few ideas in my mind. First, I thought, well, how could Joe Biden survive another few years, even though he is pushing 80? His health does not appear to be in very good condition, a fact that has been hidden from the American people in a very, very egregious way, in my opinion. They have the right to know about the health of their leaders so they can make an informed decision on if they want to keep them or not, and all these other things. How in the world can this happen? And then I realized something. Vivek Ramaswamy, someone who I am 100% supportive of president, he has recently made a comment that I think is quite prescient, and he said that it's not Biden who is running, it is the administrative state, the managerial state, the apparatus of control in our country that is actually running, and Biden is merely the puppet. And that got me thinking a lot of things. Indeed, this is perfectly seen in Joe Biden's incoherent announcement for his presidency in 2024.
With regard to age, I can't even say, I guess how old I am, I can't even say the number. It doesn't register with me. And but the only thing I can say is that one of the things that people are going to find out, they're going to see a race, and they're going to judge whether or not I have it or don't have it.
But I'm not here merely to attack gaffes or rhetorical mishaps. All of that stuff is ultimately secondary and beneath the scope of this channel. What I'm concerned about is that the Biden administration is going to have to answer tough questions about what they have done to affect the course of American civilization. And what I mean by that is that they have effectively managed to attack two cornerstone positions of American civilization. They've managed to attack posterity, I'll get to that in a second, which under the umbrella of posterity follows the youth and all of that kind of stuff. And they've also managed to attack sound moral reasoning. And they have done this in a complete rebellion against constitutional order. Now, the thing is this: many people don't have the toolkit to make these critiques. And many folks simply have a dislike of their preferred or a political candidate that doesn't make them very happy. But I think that it's very important to have these substantive toolkits, because that way your argument becomes unassailable by any reasonable person. The problem is we live in the age of unreason. We live in the age where objective truth is no longer seen as a possibility. We live in an age where morality is seen as a subjective matter of taste as opposed to a matter of human existence and the preservation of society. We live in an age where up is down and down is up. We live in an age where taste are considered to be ethics and ethics are considered to be taste. We live in an age where a lot of things have gone wrong. But we also live in an age where all of us still have the ability to correct our wayward path as a civilization. I mentioned the two cornerstones that Biden attacked. Joe Biden, his administration, has led the political assault on the true condition of children. Indeed, Joe Biden said in a sit-down interview with Dylan Mulvaney that it is actually immoral for states around the nation to restrict a child's ability to alter their body permanently through puberty-blocking hormones and other procedures that are meant to affirm the category of a quote-unquote trans child. And of course, as opposed to actually trying to justify his proposition, he merely issues a platitude and waves his hand and says, oh, trans children, people are scared of them, so that's why people don't want those children to actually be able to live out their true lives. Well, the actual fact is, children are not in their right mind. Children are still developing. Children themselves, due to this fact that they are still developing and they are still rather novel to this world, are what we call innocent, as in they have not been exposed to the full scope of human existence, or even half of human existence. And if they were to be exposed to certain things, it would negatively impact their development and also impact their ability to understand the world properly. And people don't really get the last part. There is one part about the physical development of a child that is quite important and indispensable. And we should always be protecting that. But we also forget the moral education of a child. Moral education has actually been lost in America. We focus on reading, writing, arithmetic, and in many cases also on and nonsense ideas like gender ideology. The fact that there can be the idea that there can be more than two genders, the idea that sex is fluid, all this kind of stuff. The idea that racism is a political position, all this stuff that comes from the annals of postmodernism and has sneaked its way into our civilization. We teach that, but when it comes to actually instilling a sense of personal responsibility into people, teaching people the relationship between duty and obligation in a just society, teaching folks what justice actually means as a principle as opposed to a political rallying cause, teaching folks these very basic things, the importance of individualism, these philosophical concepts, as opposed to teaching that, we'd rather teach the other things. And so Joe Biden has kind of furthered this decline by asserting the apparatus of the state in support of this subversive idea of what a child is. The fact is, if a child is innocent, he cannot be transgender because, once again, to understand if one is transgender, if you accept the validity of that term, you have to have the fullness of your mind present. And an individual who has the fullness of their mind present, who is not held down or besieged by mental illnesses or other things which impair their thinking, they can then therefore make that determination for themselves. But no child, by definition, has that ability, and yet Biden has used the machinery of the state to fortify his proposition, to legitimize the idea of transgender children, and to, through executive order, also try to defend that idea, when in all reality, that idea has no logical or moral defense that can be offered. Morality is a matter of seeing the connection between the universal and the local, between what exists eternally and what is true now, and then bridging that gap by your own conduct. And everyone has the ability to do that, but if we don't have the language for it, we can't do it. So once again, the Biden administration has, through supporting this legitimate idea of transgender children, they have used a position that does not have the proper language to talk about these kind of ideas. Then, of course, I've mentioned indoctrination in the video title. And, of course, it is quite evident this is happening. The Biden administration, at the very beginning of the administration, tried to, through the Department of Education, issue a grant and to public schools around the nation, and a precondition of that grant was that the schools would have to teach even Mexicans how to be anti-racist and other forms of critical race theory and ideas born from the school of critical theory. And of course, this was eventually withdrawn, but the fact that it existed in the first place, and the fact that Biden himself has been more than willing to tout ideas of like systemic racism and class oppression, things that black folks are supposedly inherently dealing with by virtue of their existence in this country, that all of that stuff demonstrates the administration's willingness to shove down a bunch of political ideas into the minds of youth as opposed to instructing them in what should actually be instructed. And this kind of goes into a general fact that goes beyond Biden. When political power assumes control over education, it is no longer education. It is whatever the state wants it to be, which is one of the reasons why I think that the Biden administration's treatment of these topics, attempting to insert them into the school system via grants, is actually one of the reasons why we need to have a decentralized education system. It's one of the reasons why the Department of Education needs to be abolished immediately, because ultimately, if the considerations of political power are not the considerations of the truth, because in a just society, knowledge will ultimately catch up with political power. And when knowledge does that and political power feels threatened, political power will then suppress that knowledge. Why do you think Stalin killed a lot of Christians in the 30s? Why do you think Hitler went out and took out dissidents? Why do you think whenever a tyrannical regime raises up, those who actually speak truth to power, the true intellectuals, not the regime-bought corporate media propagandists we know today that call themselves intellectuals, Robert Reich, not those people, the true intellectuals, why do you think those are the first ones to go? Because a society where knowledge is allowed to flow freely is a threat to ultimate authority. Once again, Biden has set a very dangerous precedent by continuing to use political power to push ideas in education that need not be pushed. But of course, I've also mentioned moral calamity, and I think that actually moral calamity complements both of the things I've talked about. We live in a country that has a very clear, unambiguous moral framework. And that unambiguous moral framework affirms the existence of a few things. It affirms the existence of objective truth. It affirms the existence of man's ability to use reason. It affirms the existence of liberty as a means of us being able to have rational control over our actions. It affirms the existence of private property rights. It affirms the existence of so many different things. And this constitutional moral order is not a nicety that makes us feel good, just a piece of paper. No, these are things that are the precondition for a flourishing civilization. In the absence of the things I just mentioned, civilization can not only not flourish, it will inevitably die a terrible death. And indeed, by his various unconstitutional policy measures, such as forcing millions of Americans to get a medicine that they may have objected to on their own, and many other things, Biden has shown he does not care about the moral order of the Constitution that emphasizes these things. So in the face of all of these facts, we have to really ask ourselves the question, how can any American of good conscience support this administration? How can any American of good conscience who actually believes in the principles this nation was founded upon, understands the preconditions of a just society, and all of that stuff, how can anyone of good conscience sit here and say, I'm a Biden supporter? I'm not saying be Republican, but I'm saying, how in the world can you affirm an administration that is so decidedly, wantonly, and promiscuously anti-American? I argue you cannot. And the answer to Biden 2024 should be a rejection, a firm rejection of what we are seeing. It should be a firm rejection of the principles he has touted. Postmodernism over the idea of objective truth. Feelings and passions over the ideas of facts. All political rhetoric over the ideas of substance. We should reject all of these ideas firmly as Americans and then forge a path forward that is absent of actors like Biden and those who are within his administration, and they are kept out of positions of power vis-a-vis political action, vis-a-vis cultural conversations, and vis-a-vis changing the hearts and minds of those who may be swayed by their trickery and their silver tongues. My friends, I love you guys so much. If you love me, be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this video, comment on this video. Please go to my locals, christianwatson.locals.com. Please be sure to support me on there if you can. I want to keep bringing content to you guys. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.